ROSMY was started in 1991. We had a telephone support line and weekly youth group meetings for LGBT youth ages 14 to 21 because they faced so much isolation back then, even a cognitive isolation, a lack of access to accurate information about homosexuality. I want to talk, though, about something that isn't well known about ROSMY. We spent a lot of time our first few years doing a lot of public speaking, primarily to adults who worked with youth. And there was a report that came out in 1988, the US government report on youth suicide. And there was a line from there that I would always use to open my presentation. And the quotation goes, "Gay youth will often use two coping mechanisms which only tend to make their situation worse." And the audience would always guess what one of them was, which was substance abuse. And we did like 100 presentations our first 2 years. Nobody ever guessed what the second one was. That tended to make situations, a coping mechanism that tended to make situations worse for gay youth was professional help. And we would talk with counselors, guidance counselors and social workers and therapists about why that was the case, and so that they would know how better to deal with gay and lesbian youth. I remember one time we spoke in front of a group from the Virginia Education Association, which the year before refused to vote in favor of a resolution in support of gay youth. It didn't even get off the floor. And after I spoke for 5 minutes, I turned the whole program over to a panel of our youth. And they had powerful stories. I mean, the audience was in tears when they heard all these stories about how these students were humiliated and harassed and beaten. And that at the next VEA annual convention, these people advocated for that resolution and then made sure that it did get passed. Since we're talking about history, Jerry shouldn't just be a panelist. You should be talking about your contribution, because he took part in something that was the first thing that ever happened in this country. The first radio and TV ads aimed at gay youth happened right here in Richmond, and Jerry wrote and edited and produced the first TV commercial.
We may have different hobbies.
We may have different kinds of pets.
We may wear different types of shoes.
Our hairstyles may be different.
We may like different kinds of music.
But we all have one thing in common.
ROSMY! Supporting gay, lesbian, and bisexual youth.
Call 353-2077.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us everywhere.
I'm gay.
I'm a lesbian. I'm bisexual.
ROSMY is a safe place to come and talk.
Or you could just call the youth support line.
If you want to talk, they'll listen.
I'm just grateful my daughter has a place to go.
ROSMY helped me realize that I'm okay.
ROSMY! For gay, lesbian, and bisexual youth 14 to 21.
Most of those TV spots ran in a inexpensive market, which was on cable shows like Beavis and Butthead on MTV. Remember those? But the radio ads, they were aired on the most popular radio stations for teenagers. And they, after, I don't know, like a week, they got pulled off the air. Too many parents complained about having to explain to their little kids, what's a lesbian, you know? We did a petition drive, and that went nowhere. And then we did a phone blitz. We actually set up a phone line in Phoenix Rising. Is that still around? And whenever someone would walk in, here, you need to call the station, and you know, we flooded them with calls, and they finally relented. It was bizarre because the first they said, well, you can say gay and bisexual, but you can't say lesbian. And we didn't understand what that was about. And then later they changed and said, well, you can't say bisexual because they'll do anyone. And it just, but the main, they said it was okay if we did it as long as it was after 9 o'clock at night. It was just such a joy to work with the youth because you just see them transform overnight. You know, some would tell stories that they came to the youth group and the week before but didn't have the courage to come in, and they finally did. And you see them coming in all nervous and everything, and then and you can sense some shame about who they are. And then in a week's time, they look fine.